All right, hello YouTube. Welcome to Geekery Abides episode. I just realized that the welcomes. No, never mind. That's right, 29. I don't know. I think I was just looking at the schedule and realized 30 was coming up next, and suddenly got into my head here and thought we're supposed to be on episode 30 today. No, we are on episode 29 of Geekery Abides. Got the main topic this week going to be Dune Part 2, which just hit theaters last week. Let me go ahead and hit the intro and get the podcast stuff started first, and we'll dive right into it.
He who is ashamed of his geekery has forgotten the face of Stan Lee.
This is the podcast, Geekery Abides.
Hello and welcome to Geekery Abides, episode 29. My name is Tad, your host as always. And yeah, here for the first episode in March. Just seems wild to me. I think I said it on the Dark Tower show earlier too, but it seems nuts that it's already March. It feels like it should maybe still be, it feels like it should be January, to be honest. Like late January is what it feels like to me. Maybe early February, but definitely it shouldn't be, 9 days into March already, that's wild. But yeah, here for episode 29, main topic is going to be Dune Part 2 when we get around to the main topic, of course. But let me go ahead and get the slide changed over here. First of all, I want to tell you about the emails. If you want to contact the show, the main way to do that, if you're not joining live in the live stream, like so far, Mike is with me here in the chat. If you're not doing that and engaging real time, the best way to contact the show is through email. The best way to email is Tad, which is spelled Tadd, at geekeryabides.com. Again, Tad at geekeryabides.com. Shoot an email over there and contact the show. Let me know if you agree with something, disagree with something, whatever. Any reason to email the show. That is the main way to contact the show, other than being here real time in the live stream over here on YouTube. All right, let's go ahead and jump next over to watching, reading, playing. What have you been watching, reading, playing? For me, I'll start kind of backwards again because there's usually less for me to talk about on playing and reading. Still just playing MLB The Show. We're getting close to baseball season starting up, which I'm excited for. So I've been playing that, and also I just love sports games because it's usually just an easy 20-30 minute, maybe 40-minute thing. If I've just got a little bit less than an hour to kill, I can just throw a game of that on, play it real quick, and then be on my way. I don't know why that feels like less of a commitment than watching a show. Probably because even on a 20-something minute episode, if I'm watching a 30-minute show, it feels like I always end up wanting to watch more than one episode. So it's at least 40 to minute commitment, if not more, if I end up watching more episodes than two, which is always funny to me, the psychology of that as well, because there are times where I'm like, you know what, I'm just not feeling a movie right now. I just want to watch a show, and I'll throw a show on, and then before I realize it, I look down and I've watched 4 or 5 episodes, and it's easily the same runtime that I could have just watched a movie. So I don't get what the psychology is on that, but it happens to me all the time. Mike says reading Under the Dome, not watching or playing anything. Work's been too crazy. I definitely feel that. I think that is half of the reason that I have been a little bit less when it comes to playing and reading. I mean, I've got plenty of video games in my Steam library, as well as on my consoles. I don't know why I'm not playing more. Probably just because I'm so burnt out after long work days. Something mindless again like a sports game works a little bit better for me than trying to dive into something a little bit more heavy. And then reading, I actually just started based on the Dark Tower Palaver Patreon. Chris from Australia recommended me the book Swan Song by Robert R. McCammon. Came out in the late '80s. It is I wouldn't call it a post-apocalyptic. It's an apocalyptic novel, kind of in the same vein as like The Stand, but rather than a deadly virus, it is nuclear war. So I haven't got too far into it yet. I'm still pretty early. No mushroom clouds just yet. But I've heard a lot of good things about it over the years. I think Stephen King has even referenced it a number of times as a worthwhile read. So that is on my docket. Next, I actually, outside of it'll be my first dive into fiction almost this year. I think I started my history book that's been carrying me this year. I feel like I started that at the very tail end of the year last year. So I think this might be the first fiction for me. I am excited to get through this and then dive back into some Stephen King stuff as well. And Mike mentioned Under the Dome. That's actually one I've been thinking about because I haven't read that since it was published in the aughts. So it has been a long time since I've read that one. And then for me, watching, in terms of watching, I have obviously watched Dune Part 2. We'll be talking about that a little bit later in the main topic. But then also Masters of the Air, the second to last episode just aired yesterday. So the final episode is the upcoming Friday. Been watching the hell out of that, loving that show. I don't know, it's blowing me away. It's such a good show. And then I think I've already outlined on the last episode that I pretty much put most things aside. Masters of the Air is an exception because it's airing for the first time, but I put aside all new watch and rewatch stuff for X-Men the animated series because it is what are we, 11 days away from the new one on Disney Plus, X-Men 97, and it is a direct continuation of the original X-Men animated series. So I've got 11 days. I believe I am like a handful of episodes into the third season, and there's the third season is decent. The first two seasons are like, I don't know, 10, 12 episodes. They're a little bit shorter, but then the seasons 3 and 4 are pretty heavy, like a lot of episodes, 19 to 20 episodes, and then the last season is only like 10 episodes. So I've got to get through, I got 11 days to get through quite a handful of episodes still, so I'm really trying to make sure not to get too distracted from that so that I can hopefully get that finalized out before the new show starts up on Disney Plus. If I get to a spot where the new episodes drop, which actually that will be happening, if I remember right, it's the 20th or 21st. I don't remember what day of the week it releases, but it's that. So it's actually going to be the couple days preceding the next Geekery Abides episode. So by the time of the next episode, I'll be able to give you all an update in terms of if I was able to finish the original X-Men animated series before the new one started. And if I don't, I am tempted to hold off on the new one until I finish, but I'm hoping not having to do that. But next weekend being a non-recording weekend, there's a lot more free time for me. I'm thinking I might just buckle in for the weekend and just watch the hell out of some X-Men, so I'm where I need to be. Also, I guess that does remind me too, looking at the calendar, I don't know yet, but I am need to do some research on it. But next episode, there is a potential. I don't know that I'm going to have to move the Geekery Abides episode, but basically the Dark Tower episode is a book club episode, and we're covering one of the biggest and most exciting events in the entire series. And my hope is I can actually cover the entirety of the events of that moment in the book club, so it might actually end up running a lot longer than normal. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't done the full calculations on it yet, but there is a slight chance that I might have to move next episode. So keep your eyes peeled on social media as well as here on the YouTube channel where I can post the text stuff. Whatever I figure out in terms of the next week, I'll let you know as soon as possible, and I'll also change it on the YouTube side so it shows the time difference if I have to change. I know there's a little bit of a window I have between the two shows, but I really do not know how long the episode will take and that's assuming I even am able to do the whole event. Once I go and calculate it out, I might turn into an impossibility to do it all in one episode, and in that case it'll be fine. I'll just break it up and no big deal. So just know there's a slight chance that there's some changes for next week's next episode, not next week, 2 weeks from now's episode of Geekery Abides. I will let you know. Next up, let's go ahead and dive on into the news, and there is plenty of it. The first one, this is a wild one. Gladiator 2, its budget for the upcoming Ridley Scott film has apparently nearly doubled from what it was originally planned. It was supposed to be a $165 million budget, but the reports are it has ballooned to somewhere around $310 million for the budget. And then that is just absolutely insane. It reminds me of The Irishman by Martin Scorsese. He did it for Apple, I think. No, Netflix. And that one, I remember people kind of talking a little bit of shit on Scorsese because, oh my God, this movie's, getting up in the realm of like $200 to $300 million, whatever it was. It was insanely expensive, but there's a lot of new technology they were using in it and stuff. And I just remember some people kind of bad mouthing Scorsese a little bit on that. And it just seems like Mr. Scott is doing the same thing here on Gladiator because, yeah, 165 million up to 310 million. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is there's a pretty good chance that the marketing budget is likely going to be at least 100 to 150 million extra dollars to be spent on marketing. So, of course, I don't really like the idea of, heavily focusing on box office stuff because it doesn't really matter. To me, it's all about the art. I only like talking about the money insofar as, I don't know, like this kind of thing, like, oh my God, look at that, versus like counting box office tickets like we work in the film business, because I certainly don't. So I don't know, it's one of my pet peeves of the film fandom is everyone gets so fixated on box office, and I feel like some people try to make box office a objective measurement for a subjective art form. So it is somewhat a head scratcher though, because I kind of wonder, if you're talking another 150 million on marketing, you're going to have to, bring in $500 million or more to even come close to cracking a profit. So pretty wild. Mike says, are you not entertained? You better be at this price. Yeah, no shit. I couldn't believe it when it said it was going over budget. I was like, oh, okay. Like that's kind of normal sometimes. And when you have like a legendary filmmaker, it's, a little bit more accepted. But I was not necessarily expecting to see, price points, dollar figures of that magnitude. That's pretty wild. All right, next up, let me make sure I've got the right one here. I do. All right, the next one, we actually talked a little bit about the other half of this article on Dark Tower Palaver earlier, but the rumor is that American Psycho Lionsgate is looking to readapt the two novels, American Psycho and The Dead Zone. We talked about The Dead Zone on Dark Tower Palaver. On this side, I wanted to at least mention that they're talking about readapting American Psycho. I do not get this because I think the original is still such an all-time classic. I think it still holds up today. I have no earthly idea why they would attempt to remake this. I feel like the movie is pretty much as awesome as one could possibly imagine. So, whereas The Dead Zone, I'm a little bit more open to the idea of a new take on it. American Psycho, I don't get it. I just don't. It seems insane to me. Next up. In the Scream front, Skeet Ulrich, which played Billy Loomis in the original movie, and he obviously reprised his role in a ghostly fashion in the last movie, the sixth Scream movie, offered some insight into what he believed Scream 7 might have been had they not obviously screwed the pooch at Spyglass and fucked it all up to the point where it may never come to be. So part of the thing I took from the article here, it says we learned that Billy Loomis is the father of Sam, and he had a reoccurring presence in Sam's life as she was descending into a murder madness. She seemed to really enjoy brutally stabbing the villains to death in the end of the sixth movie. According to Ulrich, the idea was for Sam to finally embrace her inner darkness in Scream 7. And here's the quote. He says, quote, exactly that. I was hoping for exactly that. And that's sort of the idea that was pitched to me a couple years ago, that it was a three movie arc with that in mind. Now, I never saw any of the drafts of 7 or anything like that. and I don't know. I mean, it's possible that it didn't include any of that as well. But yeah, that was my hope. Is that if it was going to mean anything, that it would directly impact the plot. So. I don't have any hope. I mean, they've obviously fired the actor playing Sam, kind of erroneously, in my opinion. So her storyline is never going to get finished. I feel like if Scream 7 actually ever does come to fruition, it's going to be because they backed a Brinks truck up to Neve Campbell's house and finally paid her what she is worth. I'm hoping they'll do that. But there is also another part of me that kind of hopes that Spyglass doesn't pull their heads out of their asses, because they don't deserve a Scream movie, in my opinion, at this point. So maybe just wait till they lose the rights to it and somebody else picks up the rights and they can get started on something else, whether it's redoing this new idea of Scream 7 and trying to bring the shards together that Spyglass broke, or whether it's just doing something wholly different. Who knows? So next up, also in the horror realm, we have a number of horror things here in a row. I kind of bunched them together. Paranormal Activity is finally getting its an official video game. It seems to me I've never been the biggest fan of these movies. I appreciate what they are, and the kind of craft they put into those movies. They're very creative and stuff. They've just never been as big for me. I'd like to revisit them at some point, though, because I don't know, maybe I was a little bit unfairly harsh on them when they were coming out. I remember really liking I think it was the third one where they did the Bloody Mary stuff. I think it was the third movie, but I think it was a prequel that predated the other two movies. So that one I remember really enjoying quite a bit. The Bloody Mary stuff was really awesome. But this is pretty awesome. It feels like for the way these movies were done, I think it's a no-brainer for a video game. And obviously horror games are all the rage nowadays, which is something that I could only imagine what if I was able to go back in time and tell little 10 to 12-year-old Tad that in the future horror video games would be one of the biggest genres of video games. Of course, back in those days, I was playing nothing but what Nintendo 64, or no, not even Nintendo 64 wasn't even out yet. It would have been Super Nintendo. So even trying to comprehend a horror video game in that kind of era of that's what video games can actually bring to the table would have been insane to even think about. But again, as such a big horror fan, I always remember, at like sleepovers with my cousin and stuff, one thing we always speculated is why can't they make just like a Mortal Kombat game that was just all the horror characters, like play Michael Myers versus Jason or Chucky versus Leprechaun, or, just to have like a fighting game, and obviously the later, Mortal Kombat games in the last, decade or so have actually been doing guest characters with some horror characters. So I've seen like a small sliver of what that could look like. And obviously nowadays with like it's a two-dimensional playing field, but it's three-dimensional graphics, so it's obviously like insanely better graphics than I ever could have imagined back in the Super Nintendo days. But that's pretty cool. Also, the Paranormal Activity game is coming from the makers of Mortuary Assistant. The Mortuary Assistant, which is a game I've been playing a tiny bit. I haven't had a chance to play it in a couple months. But when I was playing it, it was fucking intense. I have realized that in the last probably 6 months or so, I've been diving into some horror games. And I probably could have had a little bit of a hint to this because of Alien Isolation back in the day was the same way, is I just feel like it affects me differently. Like I think I've seen so many fucking horror movies that they just don't affect me. And I'm not saying that to try to be like macho, like whatever bullshit. I'm not. It's just a matter of after you've seen, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of horror movies, I feel like there's kind of a certain code that eventually you start to see the code, see the matrix as it were. And it just gets to a point where you appreciate the art for what it is, but it doesn't necessarily like scare you, and like every once in a while, sure, a jump scare will get me, but that's cheap. That's just a loud sound. It makes you jump type thing, not really true scare, like whatever. I feel like I haven't been really scared by anything since I was like 14 or 15. I think it's about the time I really got to the point where I was just whatever. But I will say, in the last 6 months or so, diving into some horror games, I've realized that the code is completely different with video games. When you're now controlling it, like it's no longer you're on a track. A movie, like it's like a roller coaster. You're on a track. it's going to drive you through a certain story. And I think it's kind of like, I think roller coaster is how I used to say it. I'm stealing the whole reading the code of the Matrix from a filmmaker. I can't remember who it was. It was a horror filmmaker, and they said something like that. But my old analogy was it's like a roller coaster. Once you've been on a number of roller coasters, you realize they only have a certain number of tricks that really exist for each horror or for each roller coaster. And I think horror movies are the same way. So when you've been on pretty much, say I've been on, fucking 20% of roller coasters in the United States, like that would be a sizable amount. And by a certain point, there's just, you've gotten used to like the highest speeds, the sharpest drops, all the just, whatever things that they do. And that's, so it gets to a point where it's like, you still enjoy a roller coaster, but they're not really affecting you in the same way. That's how I used to always, I guess talk about horror movies. But with Mortuary Assistant was one specifically, but also some other horror games I've tried. What I've realized is with those, there is no track. You're now free roaming, and the horror is going to happen to you or whatever. And there's just something weird about giving someone like me the choice, because now it's like you're not putting me on a track that will drag me through the whole thing. But now I have to like be more invested, I guess, and I have to like, I have to move the character forward. I have to open the door, whatever it is. There's just something about it that's it's triggering a different part of the brain or something, because it's the first time I've been like spooked by stuff in a long, long time. I mean, again, because it's mostly been movies, but video games have been getting to me in a way that movies haven't in a very, very long time, over half a lifetime ago. So I do appreciate that. And Mortuary's Assistant is fucking insanely good. So with those folks working on Paranormal Activity, I would imagine it's going to end up being a really good video game. So that's really fun. Next up, and this is actually apropos for tonight, because after this episode is finished, I'm going to be going over to the theater and meeting up with Hayden, and we're going to go see Imaginary, the new horror movie with the little haunted teddy bear named Chauncey. So in that vein, Jason Blum recently said that he wants to see Megan and Imaginary, those two movies, cross over. And you got a quote here from him. He says, "Well, I'd love to see Chauncey and Megan have a fight. Maybe one day we'll do that." And of course, Blumhouse, which Jason Blum is the namesake of and one of the chief operating people of that film studio. He has every ability to do that because he owns both Megan and Imaginary. So we'll have to see if that actually comes down the pike. Blumhouse is amazing. Jason Blum is awesome. As a horror fan, I'm all about it. I can't wait to see Chauncey. I'm hoping it's half as good as the trailers. If so, Hayden will be screaming and I will be laughing. So we'll have to see if down the road Chauncey and Megan end up on screen together. Next up, this one looks really fun. There is a new horror comedy film that has been announced, which is Rednecks versus Aliens. And of course there was like Cowboys versus Aliens back in the day, which kind of sucked. But my first thought when I read the title of this is I prayed to God it's anywhere near as good as Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which is one of my all-time favorite horror comedy movies that came out, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, something like that. But it's that, you've got these two rednecks that, kind of in a way seem like they might be like the sinister killer rednecks of a movie, but then it turns out that like the main characters are all scared of them, but then they're all causing their own deaths, and like Tucker and Dale are innocent, and they're just looking like, dude, these kids are like a suicide pact. And it is so funny, and it really plays a lot of horror tropes and stuff, and it's a brilliant movie. So when I first read this title, Rednecks versus Aliens, I'm really hoping it's in that vein and not like Cowboys versus Aliens with Harrison Ford and the new the latest James Bond, Daniel Craig. Mike says from 2010. So what did I say? I said 10, 12 years ago. So I was a couple years shy. That's nuts. It was in 2010. That's a long fucking time ago, it seems. 14 years ago. That's wild, man. And it's funny, it's because in my general mind, I was like, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, that probably came out 5 or 6 years ago. And then in my head, I stopped before I said anything, and I'm like, no, Tad, you're always underestimating this shit. So just like double it or come close to that. And that's why I went 10 to 12 when it turns out it was 14 instead. Thank you, Mike, for checking on that. I love that movie though. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. And he says, "I love Tyler Labine, which I'm not sure who that is, but I'm assuming it's one of either Tucker or Dale. They're both incredible. But for this Red Eggs vs. Aliens, it says genre-bending movie following 3 adventure-seeking hillbilly buddies who quote make enemies with the wrong alien brood, inadvertently igniting a war of the worlds." So I really, really hope this is good, man. I love horror comedies. I think they're just some of the best genres, because I feel like they feel so opposite for the audience. But from everything I've ever heard from filmmakers, whether it be actors or directors or even just crew people, is when you're on the set for like a comedy, like some people might laugh, but overall it's actually kind of miserable for most people. And you know, dramas, whatever, there's all this stuff. But then when you get to horror movies, that is where I've heard are some of the funniest, some of the funnest, some of the most jovial, like sets in general. So it's like behind the scenes, horror is some of the funnest shit to make. And so I think not only do I love like that weird like tension between horror and comedy they shouldn't mix, but that when they do, they're really good. But also just knowing that, you know, they're having so much fun on the sets of horror movies so often that it's just kind of nice to be able to lean into some comedy elements as well. And he says Tyler was Dale. Okay, yeah. That's what I figured. I was one of those dudes. Yeah, I love that movie though. I need to watch it again. It's been probably at least 5 or so years since I watched it last. I remember watching it with a group of friends on a Halloween a few years back. I guess just before COVID. So, yeah, about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe. So 2018, 2019 Halloween. So, I do love that movie, though. So, yeah, Rednecks versus Aliens. Can't wait for that. Like I said, my only apprehension is Cowboys versus Aliens was a really shitty movie. So, hopefully it's not in that vein. Next up, still in the horror realm, we got Final Destination Bloodlines begins its production. It has begun filming. So I think we've talked about this on a previous episode. Final Destination is doing a new movie. It's the first movie they've done in a long time now. They had 5 or 6 or 7 something Final Destination movies, but they were all like Friday the 13th, where every Friday the 13th in that early era was every single one of them was in the 80s. And then it was like once you turn into the 90s is kind of when that series went off the rails a little bit. But it was nuts when you look at like Friday the 13th 1 through like, God, is it 8? All came out in the 1980s. So it was like almost every single year there was like a movie coming out, with very, very few exceptions. And it feels like Final Destinations were kind of that way, where they were so condensed. There was a lot of them, but they were very condensed in the early 2000s, where not a whole lot of them really dragged into the teens, or certainly not into the 20s, obviously, or we would be way more familiar with them. But they're a little bit further back. And why I'm excited for this is because I actually decided maybe a year or so ago to go and binge through the Final Destination movies, because it had been years, and I think I made it through the second one, and they weren't bad. But I will say what's insane to me, and maybe this is just part of getting old, is it was one of the first times that I truly felt something that kind of doesn't feel old to me, right? Because that was like when I was just out of high school in the early 2000s and shit. But it felt so fucking painfully dated. And it's weird because like in my mind, I don't know what dated means when it's in, like, I don't know what the aughts. I don't know what the aughts looks or feels or sounds like, and I don't think I really had a clear vision of that until I started rewatching these, and like the clothes they were wearing, the hairstyles, the the music they were playing, like through the movie, like the soundtrack, not the score but the soundtrack. There was just a feel to it that was so 2000s, and I never would have thought that was even a thing until trying to rewatch these. And I think I got through the second one before I petered out and went on to something else. And I do want to go back and watch the rest of them for sure. But I do I'm very intrigued by the idea of what does Final Destination look like in the more modern era, when you've kind of removed it from, Creed songs in the soundtrack, and baggy pants and low waistlines on women, and really shitty NSYNC type haircuts, all the stuff that you would think about for the aughts. I'm really intrigued by what this will actually look like, and I wonder if it'll kind of reinvigorate Final Destination, where we'll start kind of like Saw, right? Saw was coming out pretty hot and heavy there for a bit, then it kind of petered out for a while, and then they came out with one, and it seems like that's kind of re-sparked it to where now it seems like we're going to get Saw movies every couple of years, if not every year. So maybe it'll reinvigorate the Final Destination franchise as well. Let's see, and then looks like Alan popped in as well. Says agreed. Cowboy versus Aliens. I had hopes, but damn, it got dumb. Yeah, that one. And yeah, I remember just kind of like having hope for it too. It's like, oh, cool, Daniel Craig, that's James Bond, and then Harrison Ford, and yeah, it was just. I remember just. That was one of those movies where I was in the theater, and it's like if my jaw was open, I wouldn't have been surprised because I was just like, "What the fuck am I watching here?" Yeah, I don't know. But then, as to the Final Destination, though, producer Craig Perry says, quote, after a long, hard slog through the pandemic and the strikes, day one is finally in the can. 2025 will mark the 25th anniversary of the release of the first installment of the franchise, which is interesting. I didn't realize it came out in the year 2000. To honor the occasion with another worldwide theatrical release, and in parentheses it says in IMAX no less, is a rare and wonderful thing, which he's actually he's onto something there. Horror movies getting an IMAX release is very rare. Then he says, see you next year. P.S. I know, Pet Sematary Bloodlines, but this is the title we've had for 3 years and we're keeping it. And then he ... for now. So maybe there is a possibility that they could change the name, but I feel for him. I've heard about this over the years in Hollywood where, someone really works hard on a script, or even they work hard on a movie, and then right about when they're getting close to like moving to the next phase, whether it's to release the movie or whether it's the writer that's selling it, and then a studio is getting ready to make it, and then a movie comes out that's so similar, and it's just like, oh man, like how much that's gotta suck. And it's like so many of those over the years, like you had like the 2 volcano movies, there was the 2 bug movies, there's like all these movies where they're just not really on purpose, but they just end up coming out right at around the same time. And in this case, looks like a title that he's been wanting for this for 3 years they got trumped by Pet Sematary coming out with the one called Bloodlines a few months ago. Then it says franchise creator Jeffrey Reddick. He has a quote. He says, "This film dives into the film in such a unique way that it attacks it from a different angle, so you don't feel like, quote, oh, there's an amazing setup and then there's going to be one wrinkle that could potentially save you all, that you had to make some kind of moral choice about or do to solve it." Then that's the end of his little like quote within a quote, and he says, "There's an expansion of the universe that," and then he stops, says, "I'm going to be careful. I kind of feel it unearths a whole deep layer to the story that kind of, yes, makes it really, really interesting." So it really seems like he's being cagey about what he says here. And then it goes on for it says, he continues on and says, "I will say that it's not just going to be another kind of we set up a group of people, they cheat death, and then death gets them. And there's one wrinkle that we kind of add to every movie to kind of like change it up a little bit. This one is a true Final Destination movie, but it doesn't follow that kind of formula that we've established." So it does sound like we were probably in for something a little bit unique. It sounds like there's probably something very unique about it that he's trying really, really, really hard not to say. So it'll be interesting to see, to think back on these quotes down the road when we actually see the movie next year. But yeah, I don't know. I'm very interested to see it. I actually need to look and see if they're still streaming anywhere, because I should dive back into them. The funny thing is, right where I stopped too, is I watched the first 2 movies. Is the third movie one of my favorite stories of this series? Was the third movie. It was back in the day when I was still had cable, back before I was a cord cutter, and I jumped onto Comcast's little menu, and you could like cycle through a menu and it would show you like movies, and it was kind of like on demand. It was like the very, very early era of having some on demand shit. But usually what it was is it was like, oh, if so and so station plays this movie, you can come in here and you don't have to tune in at the right time. You can just go into the menu, find the movie, click go, and watch it. It was kind of a very, very early precursor to what we would eventually see with streaming. And I clicked on Final Destination 3. I hadn't seen it yet, and I think I was probably like 40 or so minutes, 50 minutes into it maybe, before I realized I was watching a fucking edited made-for-TV version of it. I mean, of course, I'm a horror fan, so I noticed that it was constantly cutting away from the most grisly scenes, but it's like, especially in the early 2000s, we were so used to seeing PG-13 horror movies that the whole idea of like implied violence was nothing new to me. And I will say it took that long before I got into it, maybe 40 to 50 minutes before I finally got to one kill that was edited so sharply that it took me out of it enough to realize, like, wait a minute, that wasn't right. And I stopped and somehow I looked it up to figure out that it was edited for TV, and I realized I had wasted almost an hour watching a movie with all the best shit cut out. So I am actually interested to dive in and watch the third Final Destination with all of the bloody and wonderful things involved and not editing shit out. So that's one of my favorite stories, though. Let's see. Mike says they should do a crossover Final Destination with either Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th. They can get really creative with that. Yeah, I honestly, Friday the 13th, it feels like it's finally coming back from the dead. They've had some legal issues that have been going for a long time, and for a while there, it seemed like we'd never see another Friday the 13th movie, but it seems like that has all been resolved. I believe there is a Friday the 13th TV series in the works right now. Movie-wise, I don't know, but Nightmare on Elm Street, I think, still feels kind of dead in the water. I haven't heard anything about it. They tried to do the new version where they recast and they just remade the first Nightmare on Elm Street, and it wasn't very well received. I know there's been a lot of talk about trying to get Robert Englund back for one more movie or more, potentially, if he's down for it. But I just don't know. I don't feel like I've heard anything about Nightmare on Elm Street for a long time. I wonder if Wes Craven passing away had something to do with that. But I don't know. Yeah, I haven't really seen anything on either of those, but yeah, and I even wonder if crossover movies, I mean, I know we just talked about Jason Blum talking about crossing over Megan and Imaginary, but I kind of wonder if like crossover films are even a thing that we're going to see a whole lot of anymore, right? Because it feels like that was such a thing of the aughts. Like you had Alien versus Predator, Jason versus Freddy, there was all this kind of stuff, and I just don't know. But I don't know. I mean, I'd say let's see it come back with its own movie here. And then see where they can go from here. But it'll be interesting. The thing I'm really intrigued by is all of the younger people that are teenagers now, whether they're high school age or a little bit out of high school, and kids that may never have seen any of the originals, and they're going to go into this one for the first time and kind of get an idea of what Final Destination is. That'll be kind of cool to see, like young people on the internet start to talk about, oh my god, I've never heard of this before, but this movie was awesome. Hopefully it's awesome so they can say that. But yeah, we'll see. In terms of crossovers though, it'd be interesting to see what if crossovers continue to happen, for sure. Alan says Jackie Earle Haley got duped. They could have made a much better movie, especially with the reboot. I blame the producers. And I don't know. I just remember not really liking the movie overall. I think it was just, because the original is so good to me that it just felt, I don't know. I feel like there's like a certain element of like, even I think rebooting is almost better than remaking, because if you're not really trying to stand on the ground of like a classic, right? Like Rob Zombie's Halloween, I don't necessarily hate, but there is an element of like, hey, you're kind of standing on John Carpenter's like classic here, and you're never going to be better than it. So, and I feel like that's kind of the way I felt about that Nightmare on Elm Street was, you're never going to be better than that original. So I don't know. I just I remember not really overly digging it. But I remember seeing it with some friends, and some of them kind of were scared by it. They weren't into the original. I remember the mom getting offed at the very end, laughing my ass off because everyone thought it was like over. The more music was playing that made it feel like the movie was over, and then Freddy gets his one last scare. And I remember some friends really getting affected by that. So maybe I'll have to even revisit that. I've actually, honest to God, been thinking, I know I mentioned during the watching reading playing that right now I'm absolutely focused on X-Men, the animated series, to get through that in the next 11 days. But one that I've actually been really thinking about for probably about a year now, and about a year ago I bought the DVD box set of the Nightmare on Elm Street collection. And I've been thinking about going through and revisiting those because for some weird reason, I remember growing up, we rented the fuck out of the original and we rented the fuck out of Dream Warriors. But most of the others, I think I may have rented each of them like once, and I don't remember really enjoying them, but I really want to revisit them because I wonder if it was just, punk ass little 10, 11-year-old Tad that was just like, fuck Freddy, man. Michael Myers is better, because that's the kind of kid I would have been, because that's the way most kids are, although they aren't watching those movies usually. So I would like to go through and revisit them, especially like some of the more meta ones, like is it New Nightmare, the one where they're going to stop making Freddy Krueger movies, so Freddy Krueger comes alive and starts killing actors and producers so he can scare up and get them to make another movie, like very meta shit. Definitely precursor to like Scream that Wes Craven would obviously play with the whole meta element quite a bit. So I would like to revisit them all. Maybe when I revisit them all, I'll make sure to throw in that that reboot as well and see if maybe I was too harsh on it back in the day when it came out. Next up, we've got more horror. Miramax's Halloween TV series will be a, quote, complete reset. And we got a quote from some of the people behind it here. Of course, Miramax is developing a Halloween TV series. Of course, down the road at some point, they'll also start making more movies. I don't think they're going to be heavily connected anymore. I think that like the Halloween Ends was kind of going to be like the bookend of that. And I think that whatever they do moving forward, I don't know that we'll see Laurie Strode again. I don't think Jamie Lee Curtis is ever coming back. And with this TV series is a whole thing where it's like, what is this even going to be? But we're getting our first indications of what it might be. And the quote is, quote, the foundation of it is the original film, the John Carpenter movie, the characters of that film, and perhaps a ground of characters that we haven't really focused on that much in recent film versions, or even in a number of them. And then it goes on. It's a creative reset completely, and goes back to the original film as opposed to spinning out any of the more recent film adaptations. So, I mean, it's interesting to me because when I first saw the headline saying complete reset, I'm like, oh my god, like they're gonna go fucking hardcore and just restart everything. But then they're saying that no, the original movie still exists. So in my mind, I'm gonna be a little bit nitpicky with words here. Don't call it a complete reset if the original movie still exists in your universe, right? If you're just going to build on top of the original, just like, every sequel that's ever happened from this series has done, don't call it a complete reset. Just say that, we're down to ground zero of just the original movie and nothing else. Like, David Gordon Green said in 2018 with that film was, hey, none of the other movies exist. We're only going off the first one. I don't know. There's a small part of me that kind of wonders, as a hardcore Halloween fan, it would be interesting to me if they would actually legitimately go complete reset. Because there's kind of part of me that wonders, I love the Halloween series. I adore it. But as I analyze it in my head, like what, I don't want to say weakness. What are some areas that they can, if they were going to do a complete fresh refresh of some kind, what are some things that they don't want to do to shackle themselves down? And in my mind, the connection to Laurie Strode is a big one. Like the first movie and the second movie is her. The third movie was its own little thing that doesn't really count for most people. Then the fourth, fifth, and sixth movie, it's like, Jamie Lee Curtis's character had a baby. She died in a car accident, which later they'll say that she faked that car accident or whatever. But now we're following her daughter that doesn't have her mom anymore, and then we follow her through those three movies, and then like H2O kind of like throws those out the window, and then goes back and says that like she faked her death, and now she's living in California. And then Resurrection kind of follows off of that, and then Rob Zombie does his own shit, and then the David Gordon Green stuff takes place off the original. There's part of me that kind of thought like so much of that is so tied into Laurie Strode. The David Gordon Green trilogy is all very tied to her. The H2O Resurrection are all tied to her. The Rob Zombies are tied to her. The 4, 5, and 6 are tied to her kind of by proxy. And there's kind of part of me that wondered, what if Michael Myers is a little bit more of a boogeyman? Maybe the first one he escapes from a mental institution, like the original, but what if he doesn't find Laurie Strode? And what if it turns into a thing where at the end it feels like he's defeated, but then you leave it in a way to where he's almost a little bit more supernatural, where he's no longer tied to Haddonfield, he's no longer tied to Laurie. What if he could just pop up anywhere, kind of like Scream, where the last Scream movie was in fucking New York City and it was really cool? What if Michael could show up in New York City or LA or Houston, Texas, or and he could just pop up in different areas on Halloween, victimizing different people. And I don't know, I know that's a complete different thing than what Halloween's ever been before, but it feels to me like if you really took the shackles off and didn't tie him down to one character or one town, but just connect him to the holiday of Halloween, I wonder if that can be kind of an interesting way to move forward. And I don't know, I'm a huge fan, but that's some of the brain things I've thought of, because it's like, now you've got an unlimited amount of sequels that you could just kind of do. You have different filmmakers, different actors, just make sure you keep the costume and the mask the same and you're good. So And then Mike says, TV for broadcast or streaming? I would assume streaming. I actually don't know if they've even announced Miramax Halloween. Yeah, I don't know if they've even sold it yet. TV rights to Halloween franchise. Plots a cinematic universe. Yeah, I think this is all still in the early stages. I don't think they've actually tied to anyone yet, but I'm almost certain it's going to be either like streaming or like an HBO-ish type where I highly doubt they're going to go like broadcast level. If they did, I would be absolutely stunned. So next up, we've got I Know What You Did Last Summer. Man, this is feeling like fucking throwback, and I know this has been all horror movies this last number of articles here. So I Know What You Did Last Summer is getting a sequel coming down the pike. And it says writer Leah McKendrick says, it's hot people doing questionable things, right? At its core, I think it really reckons with some big ideas about hero and villains, right and wrong, how your skeletons come back to haunt you. And in the age of the internet and the age where fame is such a revered concept, the creation of TikTok and social media, who is Julie James in a world where there are no secrets anymore? And then she goes on and says, I obviously watched 8 million times while working on it, but it's fun. It's just a popcorn wild ride. It's campy at times. Jennifer Love Hewitt is so hot. Freddie Prinze Jr. is so hot. Sarah Michelle Gellar and Ryan Phillippe, they're so gorgeous. It's like beautiful people behaving badly. You just can't get enough of it. There's a lot of that in this film. So I'm intrigued. I've always liked the I Know What You Did Last Summer. I remember reading the book back in grade school that the original was based off of. And then the first movie was awesome, I thought, back in the day. But then the sequel kind of went off the rails a little bit. But I love the idea of the killer. I love the dude in the slicker with the hook. It's just a really cool killer design. It's very spooky. And then, yeah, as you know, she's saying here is ultimately at the heart of it is, people, kind of their skeletons coming back out of their closet to haunt them a little bit. So I'm intrigued by what we could potentially see from that. Next up, Joseph Quinn, moving out of the horror section now. Joseph Quinn to star in a new Alexander Garland war movie. Joseph Quinn, of course, is Eddie from Stranger Things the last season, and he is also the upcoming Johnny Storm, Human Torch, in the upcoming Fantastic Four. So Alex Garland obviously has the new Civil War movie coming out later in a couple months, but he has another war movie on the horizon that he's doing, and it sounds like Joseph Quinn is going to be starring in it. So Mr. Quinn has become very, very, very busy since his turn in Stranger Things. And I wish him all the best on that, man. That's awesome, because I think he did an incredible job in that last season of Stranger Things that was released. Not the last ever, because that's still coming, but the season a year or so back, he did an incredible job. I think he stole the show, in my opinion. So that's pretty cool. Next up, Spielberg. We got a trifecta of Spielberg things here. The first one here is Spielberg says that Schindler's List is his best movie. I have a quote from him here. It says, quote, "It's the best movie I've ever made. I'm not going to say it's the best movie I will ever make, but currently it's the work I am proudest of." And yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to really find fault in that logic. I think the only argument I would have is best movie doesn't necessarily mean like most rewatchable. Certainly those two things are not connected, because I do think Schindler's List is one of the hardest movies to watch, in my opinion. I feel like every time I've watched it, which has only been like 2 or 3 times over the 20 years or whatever, so I think about 20 years since I graduated high school. I think somewhere after that's about the time that I watched it for the first time. I feel like after watching the first time, I feel like every other time, the other 2 times I've watched it, it took me like months and months of like kind of getting myself to that place to like be ready to dive in and watch that movie, because it's so hard to watch. Yeah, I can't fault his logic here. So pretty cool. And then I also wanted to say that the other thing that reminded me of is there's the famous story of he had filmed Schindler's List and he went to John Williams. And he said, "John, I need you to do the score for this movie." And John Williams responded and said, "Come on, Steve, man, I'm not good enough. I can't." Something along those lines of, "I'm not good enough for this movie," type thing. And Steven responded to him and says, "I know." He said something along the lines of, "I know, but anyone that's good enough to score this movie is already dead," type thing. Kind of implying that, you'd have to go back to some of the greatest composers of all time to maybe be worthy of the movie. I of course disagree. I think John Williams not only was worthy, but I think he did an incredible job. I think it's one of his most amazing sound scores that he's ever done. So love that. Next up, Spielberg reveals that George Lucas worked on Jurassic Park. In a long time, I've been a fan of of George Lucas since I was a kid, since I was 5, and Jurassic Park I've been a fan of since I was 7, I think, 1993 when it came out. It came out in the summer. I would have been 7 years old. And then in the chat, Mike said Jaws is the most rewatchable. I can kind of agree with that. I mean, of course, my age range, I think that my first impression would have been Jurassic Park, which we're talking about now. But that was kind of my generation. That was such a big movie for my era. I remember being, again, 7 years old is like the perfect age for Jurassic Park, because what 7-year-old boy or girl is not obsessed with dinosaurs? So, but yeah, as an adult, I've come around to watching Jaws and realizing just how fucking incredible the movie is, and how, rewatchable it is, certainly. But of all the long history of knowing and loving these movies and loving George Lucas, I had never had any clue that he worked on Jurassic Park. But Spielberg is doing an interview, and he says it was basically sound mixing. So the sound mixing for the film, he had finished up Jurassic Park, but he was about to fly to Europe to film Schindler's List, which we just talked about. And then we got a quote from Spielberg to tell the rest of the story. He says, "I called George. I said, George, I'm in trouble. The studio is really upset with me that I'm not going to mix Jurassic Park, and I'm going to go off to Europe and make Schindler's List. Would you please mix Jurassic Park for me?" And then at the tail end of the quote here, he says, quote, "I already had his mixtures working on the film, so George said he'd take over, and he and Kathleen Kennedy came in and mixed the film for me." So yeah, that's insane to me. Because again, I know the two are very close friends. There's all kinds of legendary stories, like while they're Spielberg was working on Close Encounters of a Third Kind and Lucas was working on Star Wars. They both thought that the other's movie was going to be better, and they were both thought the other one was doing a better job at their movie. And the legend is that Spielberg and Lucas made a bet for 1% of the box office returns, that Spielberg said your movie is going to be better, Lucas said your film's going to be better, and of course Spielberg lost that bet, won that bet, because he bet that Star Wars would be better. And if that legend is true, I can only imagine what 1% of Star Wars box office return has been over the years. I'm sure that is a healthy 8 to 9 figure piece of money there. That is pretty sizable. There's that legend, and of course there's a legend that in episode 3 that Spielberg did some uncredited directing. I've always heard that he helped direct the Yoda Palpatine duel, although I've heard some various aspects of what exactly Spielberg did on Revenge of the Sith. But there's rumors that there was some uncredited directing that for a couple sections of the film that Spielberg actually helped and directed. Whether that's all true or not, who knows? But something I've been hearing since the early 2000s. Let's see. And then Mike says Lucas to Spielberg, faster and more intense. Yeah, indeed. I actually just saw I don't remember if it was on YouTube or if it was an Instagram reel or something, but it was actually Lucas, something that was recorded of him, and he actually said faster and more intense, and I did the Leo meme, I kind of snapped my fingers and pointed at the camera, or at the whatever I was watching, because it's like, oh, there's the fucking phrase, man. I've heard Harrison Ford talk about that. I've heard Ewan McGregor talk about that, Mark Hamill, everyone talking about how, some of the only shit Lucas ever told him is faster and more intense. So to actually hear the man himself say the words, it was great. It made me smile. Next up, the last one for Spielberg here. Spielberg was a huge fan of Godzilla -1. And this all comes from the director of Godzilla -1. Got a couple quotes from him. He says, quote, "Steven Spielberg said, 'Oh, you're the director of Godzilla. I saw it 3 times. I couldn't believe it.'" And then he's like changing back and forth between himself talking and like quoting what Spielberg said to him. "I couldn't believe it because Spielberg is like a god to me, just for what he's done in the film industry. But it sounded very, very real. Spielberg went on to say, quote, I saw it once in my home, and then I had to go see it in IMAX and then Dolby Atmos. You can't make, and then it's him talking again, saying you can't make that up. And then he goes on and says, quote, I wanted to have Godzilla appear during the daytime as well. And when the younger Godzilla shows up in the film, I kept telling myself, don't make it like Jurassic Park. Don't make it like Jurassic Park. But it kind of ended up looking like Jurassic Park. So when I met Steven Spielberg, there was another version of me that was going, well, if he says you just ripped off all my films and I'm mad at you, I couldn't have said anything back to him. So, of course, it doesn't sound like Spielberg said that at all. He was, in fact, quite a big fan of Godzilla -1, which is awesome. It's really cool to hear. There's just something about hearing about some legendary filmmakers, and I get it, like filmmakers love film, so they're going to watch film, but there's just something about like hearing Scorsese talk about, you know, this movie, or Spielberg talk about that movie, and just realize like, oh my God, like, and then to hear Spielberg saying he went and saw it 3 times, like, it's like, wow, that's as many times I went and saw it. Like, of course I didn't see it at home because I'm not a freaking world famous director that can get a new movie at home because I have hookups. So me, I went to theater all 3 times, but it's just like so cool to see not only him love the movie, but you know, kind of go and rewatch it multiple times like I did. So that's kind of cool. I really love that. Next up, we've got Godzilla -1 director wants to make a kaiju versus kaiju film that's actually good. Oh, which is kind of brutal, but not untrue necessarily. He says, quote, if I were to direct the next Godzilla movie, I would like to do a sequel to this one. There have been 2 standalone Godzilla films in a row now, so perhaps the next one will need to feature a villain monster. Quote, I don't know if anyone has achieved a more serious tone of a kaiju versus kaiju with human drama that is the challenge, is something that I would actually like to explore. Then he goes on and says, when you have a movie that features kaiju battles, I think it's very easy to put the spotlight and the camera on the massive spectacle, but then it detaches itself from the human drama component, which is exactly where a lot of the movies in the last number of years have failed very hard, and where Godzilla -1 absolutely killed it, because they were actually able to kind of convey the human element, and that the human was actually, I think I said it here on the show, where it's like the Godzilla -1 could have worked without the Godzilla in it at all. You know, just the human drama in the movie could have carried the movie, and I think that's the ultimate compliment to pay to a movie like that. So next up, we've got the first look at Bill Skarsgård as the Crow. And so this has been very divisive online. It's very unique, certainly. But it's funny because, you know, where a lot of people are getting very anti. They're getting very angry. They're saying this is stupid. It's just like kind of a Jokerish look. But from my perspective, I, having already experienced the Bill Skarsgård, you know, dealing with stepping into the big shoes of Pennywise the Clown, you know, one of the things they did very geniusly there is they made him look very different from Tim Curry's version, and I think that allowed him to then do his own thing and not really live in the shadow of him. So I kind of have that in my mind, as well as the fact that Bill Skarsgård is an insanely talented actor. So I'm pretty excited for this movie, and I am, I don't know, I'm interested to see what you know, what it's actually going to be overall. Let me see. I need to find another picture. I do have one more picture to show. I'm doing it on the side. Okay, there we go. On another screen, so you can't see it, but there we go. There's the other picture that they have of it, is Bill Skarsgård with his love interest. So that would be Eric Draven and Shelley in the movie. So I'm not really negative on it. It's definitely not it's not Brandon Lee's The Crow, but I don't think that that's necessarily what we have to go towards. So then let me actually go to the next one, because this next one is interesting. It's actually the director, a few days later, was interviewed, and he was kind of explaining the Eric Draven look. And he says, quote, I think the beauty of Bill is that he has a disturbing beauty, and as he transforms through his loss, he becomes this thing that even he can't control. It's that famous line, whoever fights monsters must be careful that they don't become one. That look was me in the 90s when we were squat raving in London, mixed with some modern influences like Post Malone and Lil Peep. I hope people who are 19 today look at him and go, that guy is us. The moment we realize bad things are coming. So it's him kind of explaining the look. I don't think he's necessarily trying to like justify it to the all the people online that are bitching, because I don't think there was time for him to really see that bitching. I think this is more of just like kind of the phase of things as you release the images, and a few days later you get an interview with the guy to kind of talk about it or whatever, which is good because I don't think he needs to explain it, man. I get some people don't like it, but I don't know. I'm excited for it. For one that's been very anti new Crow movie for a long time, the casting of Bill Skarsgård was the thing that really flipped me from being an anti new Crow movie to pro, and so I'm excited to see kind of what comes of it and what it ends up being, how good it ends up being. And then Mike in the chat says, love the Skarsgårds, all of them. Yeah, indeed. They're all wonderful. And for the longest time I used to prefer Alexander, that did Randall Flagg, and he did he played in the Generation Kill series, which is actually the first thing I ever saw him in. He was also in The Northman. I used to like him the most because I loved him in Generation Kill, and then he went on to play Randall Flagg, even though the Stand 2020 series sucked. His turn as Randall Flagg is really good. I enjoyed it anyway. So I always liked him, but honestly, Bill Skarsgård has won me over through John Wick Chapter 4, whatever it was called, John Wick 4. He was the villain in that, and not only did he do an incredible job, but I also think that I'd go so far as to say he was the best villain in that entire series. So he's incredible. And he also did a good job in Barbarian, as well as, of course, Pennywise the Clown. So, yeah, I think he might have maybe hedging out his brother for me, but yeah, I have yet to see a Skarsgård that I don't like. So I agree with you, Mike. Next up, Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill have their swan song coming. Their final pairing together will be coming out. Will be coming in the movie Justice League, Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 3. The Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 2 comes out in April next month. So Part 3, the speculation is it'll be sometime later this year, probably fourth quarter of 2024. It sounds like, I think we covered an episode or two back, the Kevin Conroy has a couple more things in the shoe that have been recorded, but it sounds like Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill working together as Batman and Joker. Their final performances as a team will be on this Justice League movie later this year. So, as of course Kevin Conroy has passed away. Next up, Christopher Nolan. We are now, of course, in the DC realm. Let's see here. So Christopher Nolan did not get the Dark Knight's most famous line. We have a quote from Mr. Nolan talking about it here, and he says, quote, "I'm plagued by the line from the Dark Knight, and I'm plagued by it because I didn't write it. My brother Jonathan wrote it. It kills me because it's the line that has most resonated. And at the time, I didn't even understand it. He says, you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain. I read it in his draft, and I was like, all right, I'll keep it in there, but I don't really know what it means. Is that really a thing? And then over the years, since the film has come out, it just becomes truer and truer. In this story, it's absolutely that. Build them up, tear them down. It's the way we treat people. So it's kind of cool to see. I knew that Jonathan Nolan has worked with Christopher on a lot of his stuff, but to kind of get behind the scenes to understand, where one brother wrote and the other did not. Not to mention the most famous line in the movie was one that Jonathan wrote and that Chris wasn't really a fan of because he didn't really get it. So that's kind of cool. Cool behind the scenes for a movie that came out a good while ago now. All right, next up, let's see, is Batman. The first look at Batman, the Caped Crusader. The first look at the character designs. I think they're calling it a leak. But whatever, it's out online, and it's kind of cool overall. So the show, let's see, let me find the slideshow here and see. Okay, I can change it. So the first one, of course, is Batman. We've already kind of seen that because the cover, the one that's on the right, is the one that we've been seeing. It's the image that's most associated with this series. The one on the left is a little bit new. But let me change the picture over to some of the other character models, which is a number of the villains. So the show is said to capture what Tim originally was looking to do with the original animated series. And he said, quote, "It kind of goes back to the original principle of the show that we originally came up with in the early 90s. there were certain limitations on what we could and couldn't do in terms of adult content, in terms of violence and adult themes. He went on to say, my idea is basically to say, okay, it's 1990 again. I get to do what I want to do this time. And then I've got J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves backing me up. So, because that is true, Matt Reeves and J.J. Abrams are involved in this on the producing side. This is basically this is the guy most primarily behind the old animated series, coming back to do a new series. And it sounds like it's going to be a little bit more adult oriented than the old cartoon we all watched back in the day. It goes on and says the series is being written by acclaimed comic book writer Ed Brubaker, who said, quote, their vision for the show was a slightly more pulpy take on the character and a new way of looking at the world of Gotham, set in the past but viewed through the modern lens, really sold me. So far, every part of it has been a blast to work on. I can't wait until the rest of the world can see what we've been building the last few months in the writer's room. All I can say is it's not what anyone is expecting, but in a good way. And Matt Reeves says, quote, there is no Justice League. It doesn't exist. There aren't any other superheroes. It's Batman. You're watching this one lone figure swim through the cesspool of Gotham. It's Batman alone. So that kind of gives us an impression of what is in store here. And then he goes on and says, so he's going to be very low tech initially. As he develops as a character, we'll start introducing those gadgets and the audience can see how he develops the Batmobile using different prototypes. That's part of the fun of this series is we're finding him discovering these things that in most of the Batman series were already there. And then the last thing I have to note on this is something Amazon Prime has ordered, and they have already ordered 2 seasons. So kind of interested to see what we'll end up seeing out of this as we get closer to the release of that. Next up, the Penguin. Let's see. The Penguin is going to be debuting this year, according to studio heads. Got a quote here from him, the studio head, the guy that loves to kill movies for tax write-offs. Fuck this guy. But he says, I think it was on an earnings call. He said, looking ahead, we've got one of the best lineups in the history of HBO. The next quarter, we'll have Hacks and House of the Dragon, followed by DC's The Penguin and a new Dune series. Then in 2025, we'll kick off the year with a new season of The White Lotus, followed by The Last of Us and Euphoria, just to name a few. So that kind of gives us an impression that we have House of the Dragon coming back as well. But The Penguin, there's been some debate whether this would actually be released this year or next. So it does sound like that is coming this year, as well as a Dune TV series, whatever that might be. I don't know if we've heard a whole lot about it. So we'll have to see on that one. Next up, we've got some Superman updates. James Gunn gives a quote-unquote new title and a suit logo for Superman. I have the logo up on the screen here. Let's see. And then he posted this on social media, and he says, overjoyed to announce the start of principal photography on Superman today, February 29th, which just so happens to be coincidentally and unplanned Superman's birthday. When I finished the first draft of the script, I called the film Superman Legacy. By the time I locked the final draft, it was clear the title was just Superman. Making our way to you in July 2025. So this is the new logo that's going to be on the suit. Still no design on the suit. I'm kind of mixed on the title. There's some people that are just saying like, oh well, there's never been a movie called Superman before, because the original was technically called Superman the motion picture. But I don't know. I kind of roll my eyes at that. The original movie, everyone has always just called it Superman. I've never once experienced someone that I've talked to that's called it Superman, the motion picture. So I don't know. I'm not into this, man. I'm getting really tired of movies using the same fucking titles all the time. Superman Legacy, I think, was a much better title, but whatever. It's Gunn's decision. It's probably the first thing that I've seen from him in the Superman realm that I've not been a fan of. So yeah, we'll see. But that's the new logo. Hopefully we'll be seeing a suit before too long. Next up, we got Wendell Pierce being cast as Perry White in Superman. Of course, he was most famous for The Wire, playing Bunk Moreland in The Wire. I actually don't even know what else he's been in. I know he was in the new Jack Ryan series on Amazon. He was in Suits, apparently. He's a great actor. He always does a good job. Let's see if there's anything else. Horrible Bosses, I've never seen that. He was in Selma. Yeah, he's definitely a prolific actor. Chicago PD, on and on and on. But yeah, The Wire is definitely what I know him most for. So him as Perry White is an incredible casting decision. I really love that. So next up, Apple TV Plus is making a companion documentary for Masters of the Air. Really excited for that. I'm not sure that HBO ever did one for the Pacific like they did for Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers had a documentary called We Stand Alone Together. So I'm really happy to see Apple picking up with what Band of Brothers got by doing a true documentary on the real people the show is based off of. They can kind of work as a companion piece to the actual show, which I have been loving Masters of the Air, by the way. It's one of my favorite. I mean, it's a new year, so I can't say it's my favorite show of the year because that's not saying much, but it's absolutely incredible. It's blown me away at every stage, so I can't wait for the finale. I do wish there was 10 more episodes though. Next up, Eben Moss Bacharach talks about The Thing and the Fantastic Four movie. So he of course is playing The Thing, Ben Grimm. And he says, all my life, so they asked him, how long have you known you're going to be playing The Thing in the Fantastic Four? And he jokingly answers, all my life. No, I found out in the beginning of August. I was taking a walk in the city. This was in the middle of the writer's strike, and I got a call from my agent. I wasn't thinking about working at all. They said, they asked you to play The Thing, and I was so shocked. Then he goes on and in the interview and says, I don't think that it's a suit. Talking about the look of The Thing. He says Michael Chiklis wore a suit. Apparently the suit was very uncomfortable. We're past that, I think. It's a little cosplay and amateur now with the technology. I believe it's mostly going to be performance capture, which makes total sense. Kind of like the Hulk in the rest of the MCU. And then he's asked a little bit about some information, but he doesn't really give any much details. All he says is, that teaser image does seem to be the 60s. He says, I have read the script. I've not yet met Vanessa. There is a group text, though. Pedro started it a couple days ago. Everyone has said something, but no one is being coy. So not a whole lot, of course, not that I would expect him to give us anything, but it is kind of cool to hear from him a bit, to know for sure they're doing a CG. And also find out that he was cast as far back as August, which is interesting because, of course, the rumors about Pedro have been around for a long time before the announcement. So it sounds like maybe the casting stuff was probably all done back during the strike. We just only learned about it very recently. So very interesting stuff. Valentine's Day, I think it was. They finally released the information. So next we got David Krumholtz was begged to be The Thing. And David, most people would know him most from probably Oppenheimer. He was the bigger guy in Oppenheimer that was the American that Oppenheimer meets when he's in Europe, and he's constantly always trying to feed him, telling him he's too skinny. He's a little bit of a more portly guy. I guess the other thing that people might know David Krumholtz from is he was in the original Santa Claus. He was Bernard the Elf. Which was a shocking revelation for me that that little kid that played that elf grew up to be the guy from Oppenheimer. But he says, quote, I was embarrassed. My post said, I just want to be in the conversation. And it was a picture of The Thing, and Matt saw it somehow. And I had a meeting with him, and we discussed it, and I've never been so bold in a meeting before, just begging for the role, straight up selling the shit out of it. The idea of how committed and passionate I was for it, but obviously that didn't happen. That's always a bummer to hear, man. When people are really, really passionate about, a movie or a role, and they don't get it. I feel like it's kind of like a built-in thing that Hollywood has done to us, because Hollywood has made us all expect, like, if someone really wants something or perseveres for something, they're going to get it. That's like how Hollywood scripts work, right? And then so when real life doesn't work that way, it just makes you kind of bummed out a little bit. So that's unfortunate. I hope they can find something for him in the MCU somewhere, because he did a great job in Oppenheimer. Very warm and comforting character that he played there. Next up, we got a rumor that Miles Morales might be debuting in Spider-Man 4, the next live-action Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland. The rumor is that Miles Morales will make his live-action debut in that movie. So we'll have to keep our eyes open for that and see if he pops up there. Next up, well, let's see. I just accidentally clicked on the wrong thing. There we go. The next one is Dave Bautista says he is open to Marvel. And there's a quote here. He said, to continue with Marvel, because of course he played Drax the Destroyer. He says, no. When I said that I was done, I was really just done with my journey as Drax. I still have a relationship with Marvel. I've seen Kevin Feige again, Lou D'Esposito, as recently as 2 weeks ago, and they know that I would be up for a role. I love the universe, the superhero universe. I love it. I'm a fan. So Marvel or DC, if they call, I would answer the phone. And if the role makes sense, I'd be all over it. I would just want an opportunity to do a bigger role, a different role, maybe a deeper role. I love to have an opportunity to play like an ominous villain in a superhero movie. Yeah, but never. I'm not done with it. But my journey with Drax is over. So very interesting. I think Dave Bautista is a very, very, very talented actor. And I think that seeing him return to the MCU would be a treat for sure. Next up, we've got Henry Cavill. We're getting close to the end here. We got a few more news articles here. Henry Cavill is allegedly, rumor is, he is coming to the MCU. So there's two things I'm going to say here. First, I'm going to give what I think when I first heard that Henry Cavill was going to be a Marvel character. My first thought was I think he'd be a fucking bitch in Cyclops. A Scott Summers. In the new X-Men, I think he would do a great job. And then it was funny because after I thought about that for a bit, I realized to myself, not that it was like necessarily Superman, but the original Scott Summers actor, of course, jumped from X-Men to go to the Superman movies to play Lois Lane's husband. So he didn't necessarily go from Cyclops to Superman, but he went from Cyclops to a Superman movie. So it'd be very funny if a Superman actor went and became Cyclops. But actually, the rumors, which I find insane, are that not only do we have a rumor for the role he might be playing in the new MCU, but the rumor includes that he might actually be in the upcoming Deadpool and Wolverine movie, which is coming out in July. So if that's the case, that means that not only has he been cast in the MCU for a while, but he's filmed something and we've not known it. So, but the rumor, and this is fucking insane, to me. But the rumor is that the role he will be playing in Deadpool and Wolverine is actually Wolverine. I mean, it takes a bit to like wrap your head around that. But I do think that some of what we've heard is that, there's some multiverse stuff going on. So I kind of wonder if, yes, of course, I just fucking blanked on his name. Hugh Jackman, of course, is returning to play Wolverine in this, but he is the Fox Universe Wolverine, and the fact that we've seen pictures of him in the animated series costume makes me wonder if he is not necessarily the exact Fox one, because the Fox one technically died, but maybe he is being pulled out of the cartoon era, or the cartoon, but he's being made live action, and he's that Wolverine. But it kind of, if this rumor were true, what if Henry Cavill was the actual MCU universe's Wolverine, and the Wolverine that we might see for the next 10 to 15 years? I don't hate the idea. Of course, as a longtime X-Men fan, and now that I'm, binging the fuck out of the animated series, my only complaint would be is that he's another 6'1" inch actor playing Wolverine that's like 5'5", or he was always a short little fucker in the comic books, and the cartoons and stuff. But I still don't hate the idea, because I mean, never once did Hugh Jackman's height take me out of it at all. He was the perfect Wolverine. So, Henry Cavill could easily do it. And it would be very interesting for him to go from the most iconic DC character, if not comic book character of all time, to one of the two most iconic Marvel characters of all time, because it's either Spider-Man or Wolverine. One of the two, that's the two most iconic Marvel characters of all time for sure. And then Mike says, I can see Cavill as Professor X. I mean, I think you're joking, right? But I mean, I guess we did have what's his name playing Professor X in the more the future Days of Futures Past, and the what do you call it? The First Class universe. He was playing him, and he doesn't necessarily look like Captain Picard. So I guess I shouldn't laugh at. Maybe you aren't joking, but of course, my first thought is to laugh at him playing Xavier. But who knows? Yeah, we'll see. But in the same X-Men vein, let's move on to the next one, which is interesting. Vinnie Jones apparently turned down the return as Juggernaut in Deadpool and Wolverine. He says, funnily enough, and this is a quote from Vinny, he says, funnily enough, I was just asked to do Deadpool, the new one, now. I spoke to the director and just said it was such a drama putting on that suit. And putting that suit on mentally and physically. I mean, it had its mental toll as well, because you're in it and you can't do anything all day. You can only drink through a straw. We couldn't strike the deal for Deadpool. So once again, speaking to the idea that, Deadpool and Wolverine is going to be fucking insanity with all kinds of multiverse stuff. It sounds like they even tried to pull Juggernaut in from the X-Men 3 timeline. So pretty batshit stuff, man. I cannot wait for that movie, because I think that what we know is coming in that movie is a tip of the iceberg, and I think we're going to have our fucking minds blown come theaters when that movie comes out. Then on the final stretch here, talking Star Wars, The Acolyte, one of the stars of Star Wars Acolyte, discusses the series, and she says, in context of the Star Wars universe, it's a time of great peace theoretically. It's also a time of institution, and it's a time in which concepts around the Force are very strict. She says, I think what we're trying to explore within our show is when the institution has a singular conception of how power can be used. We try to prove a lot of different perspectives and answer the questions. The idea is to kind of honor the ethos of Star Wars and the ideas around the Force, and also challenge them, hopefully harmoniously. So that's interesting. I haven't got super hyped on this show yet. As we get closer, I certainly will. But I don't know. I'm trying not to get too hyped on stuff that's too far away. So I know that is one of the next things coming out, but when we get a little bit closer to it, I'll get a lot more hyped for it, I'm sure. Next up, Hayden Christensen talks about killing younglings in episode 3. He says, quote, kids seem to forget about that scene when they meet me. He's talking about real kids here. There's no fear or intimidation. They're just excited to meet Anakin. There's a lot of talk about us doing that scene, and I love that George Lucas did it. It was a bold move, and it's shocking. Quote, and he goes on here, when we were filming that, we were having a hard time getting the reaction that we wanted from the kids, so I shouted or growled at him because we needed a genuine moment of him being startled. I got the response that we needed, and it makes that scene work really well. And then in the article, I didn't take the quote exactly, but it says that you could actually kind of see the exact moment that he either yelled or growled at the kid by his reaction. And then Hayden goes on and says, I saw him years later, and I said, sorry about how that went. So, oh, I love the spirit of it. Just scaring the bejesus out of a child actor on set there. It's great. Next up, Hayden thought that he had lost the role of Anakin to Leonardo DiCaprio, which I know DiCaprio was up for the role. That's a famous, dating back to the late 90s, I think. That there was rumors that right after 99, there was rumors of the next movie he's gonna be older, and DiCaprio is definitely one of the names. Ryan Phillippe as well. Hayden says, I had heard that they met Leonardo and a bunch of other actors. That just confirmed my thought that the role would go to another actor. Through the entire auditioning process, I just had told myself from day one that I wasn't going to get the part, and it just wasn't a possibility. I think that probably helped me a lot, because it just freed me up in a lot of ways. And so it really came as a surprise to me when I got the part. The character was criticized, and then he goes on, there's a different part of the conversation. He says, the character was criticized, my performance was criticized, and that part sucked, but I also felt like I had some context that perhaps helped a little bit. When episode 1 came out, there were a lot of excitement that were making a new Star Wars, and it was going to be the backstory of Darth Vader, but I had friends that were upset that the character was started off as a young kid, and I watched the film, and I loved it, and it was everything I wanted and more. I didn't understand the disconnect between the movie that I saw and the negativity of some of the reviews. Then the last little bit here, he says, in a way, that sort of criticism, I think, comes from a certain failure of their own suspension of disbelief. If you're going to go sit in a theater and the opening starts with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, that's setting the stage that anything is possible. These people don't need to sound and behave the way we might expect. And if you're going to sit down and think that you're getting something that is in our current zeitgeist, then you're setting yourself up for something else. You know what I mean? So that's a great quote. I love that. It's perfect. And Hayden is awesome. And I have to say that George chose very wisely. I love DiCaprio. DiCaprio is a very talented actor, but I think that Hayden Christensen is 100 times better for the role of Anakin Skywalker. And I think that his ability to return to the role in the more recent years solidifies it to me that he is the absolute perfect actor, and George Lucas is a fucking visionary for casting him. Let's see. And then we got second to last one we got here. Go ahead and the Sith eyes on Anakin was actually Hayden's idea. Hayden, again, quote, there's a big interview series that the Empire magazine is doing for the anniversaries of the prequels, and they're having some in-depth interviews, and that's where a lot of this is coming from. And they're interviewing Hayden for this, and he says, that scene that is the real tipping point in Anakin falling to the dark side. He has Mace Windu and Darth Sidious, Jedi and Sith, both pleading for his allegiance, and he has to make a choice. When we were filming that scene, George spoke about how Anakin was conflicted, but not yet corrupted, and that he still wanted to do the right thing. And then he goes on, it was hugely transitional scene for the character, and one that sets the course for everything that follows. I remember in the weeks leading to up to filming it, I was trying to figure out how to express his turn and acceptance of the anointment of Darth Vader. I needed an observable shift in character, and this was actually the origin of George and I discussing Anakin's Sith eyes. Originally, there was no mention of it, and George was initially against the idea when I brought it up. I loved the visual of Sith eyes and thought it could make sense. Darth Maul had them and Sidious had them, and then George responded back to me saying that Count Dooku did not have them, and I thought that was the end of that. A few days later, he came back to me and said that he thought about it more, and now he liked the idea of Sith eyes, but not for that scene. Of course, we know that he'd only get them later on. And he goes on, and I think it is because it would have misinformed things. Anakin's fall to the dark side isn't just about good and evil and ideological views. It's also about timing and circumstance. And then the last bit here, Hayden says, George is a visionary and always knew exactly what he wanted, but when I had ideas, he would always hear me out and consider it. When I had an instinct on set and wanted to try something different than we were doing, he would always indulge me. I remember on several occasions explaining what I wanted to try, and George would always say, well, I know when I get to the editing room and I've got your version and my version, I'm always going to use my version, but sure, let's give it a try. And he was right. He always did use his version. So I love that. That's great. And then the last bit of news before we move to the main topic is the rumor. It's a rumor, not news. But the rumor is that the Rey movie, the upcoming Rey movie, is going to be titled Star Wars Episode 10, A New Beginning. Which, like, holy shit, if this is true, that'd be huge, because, of course, there is no planned trilogy. Of course, they've said that they don't think Daisy Ridley's role is going to be maintained or contained in this one movie, and then she'll continue on into some more stuff. But calling it Episode 10 without any hardcore plans of 11 or 12 is pretty wild to me. And, of course, it adds a bit of weight to this movie, because if it was indeed called Star Wars Episode 10, I believe that just adds some gravity to the movie. Not that it needs it, because it's just a movie or whatever, but I think it adds a lot of just weight, credibility, whatever it might be, to it. So I'm very intrigued to see as time goes if that pans out to be true. So let's go ahead and move on over to the main topic here. And I've got a soundbite because I want to get better at actually having sound bites for our main topics. Let's go ahead and hit that. All right, so yeah, we're talking Dune Part 2. I keep wanting to say Chapter 2. I don't know why, but yeah, probably because Dune was a book or whatever. But yeah, so Dune Part 2. I will say, of course, I know news went a little bit longer than normal, which is fine, because honestly, I was actually really hoping to go out and go and see this again Thursday or Friday night, so I could have seen it twice and a little bit fresher in my mind. It's been about a week since I went and since I saw it in theaters. I did not get a chance to. But funny enough, I'm actually going tomorrow with Peter, tomorrow morning, going to see it again for a second time. So everything I'm discussing today is going to be, just kind of like, I don't know. All right. So Mike says he hasn't seen Dune 2, so going to drop out to avoid spoilers. All right. See you, Mike. Thanks for joining. I kind of figured that, it might be an issue for some people that haven't got out to it yet. But yeah, definitely take a listen after you've watched it, and I'll see you later, Mike. Thanks for joining, and being part of the show. So yeah, I like I said, I've only seen it once, so I kind of want to just talk about it in general senses, and it isn't maybe necessarily as in depth as it might be if I actually got out to see it. But I will say it's a 3-hour movie, so that does make it a little bit tough. There's a few less show times than you might see with it if it was a shorter movie, and just I don't know, life was didn't give me the flexibility scheduling wise to go out and see it. So going to see the Imaginary tonight with Hayden, and then Dune 2 for my second showing tomorrow with Peter in theater. So can't wait for that. So, yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. So, part 2, Dune. The first one obviously came out. I don't even remember what year it was now. I feel like it was fucking pre-pandemic, but I don't know that it actually was Dune. 2021. Yeah, so it was post-COVID. I don't know why. I mean, I guess we were still kind of in that weird maybe COVID phase. But yeah, Dune Chapter 2, or Part 2, not Chapter 2, god damn it. I'm going to get that right at some point. So, Denis Villeneuve directing the second movie in the Dune franchise. Of course, from what I understand, I've not read the books, but the Dune first Dune book apparently is the most of this movie and the last movie make up for the story of the first book. So when they ended part 1, it was only about half of the story of the first book, and it does sound like Denis Villeneuve has one more in the future before he wraps things up. So I know there's a shitload of Dune books. I don't know how it all pans out and breaks out, and how that actually is going to work with only having one more movie when it took him 2 movies to tell one story. But we'll see. Either way, you pretty much have everyone returning: Zendaya, Timothée Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, Josh Brolin, Javier Bardem. And then we got some new people. Dave Bautista wasn't new, but he was in the old one. But we have new people like Christopher Walken, Florence Pugh, Austin Butler in a huge role. Stellan Skarsgård is returning. Yeah, so huge cast. And yeah, it kind of picks up right where the first one left off. I did not get a chance to actually rewatch the first Dune before getting my way out to see the second one. So it was only vague memories of I'm sure that it would be better if I was able to rewatch the first one and then go see the second one. But yeah, ultimately, I fucking love this movie. I let me see if I can find my social media post that I had, because I worded it just so. Let me go ahead and pull that up, because I feel like it would let's see here. I feel like that would help me without just trying to stumble through it myself with my memory, because of course that sucks. Here it is. I said The Godfather 2, Empire Strikes Back, Aliens, Terminator 2, The Dark Knight. Add Dune 2 to that list of the greatest sequels of all time. I do feel heavily that this movie is fucking just in that same realm. It is among the greatest sequels of all time. This movie killed it. It was just so well done story-wise. And again, if you're a reader of the Dune books, this finishes up the first book. But this one was a little bit way more tied in with the I'm sorry, I'm kind of a neophyte when it comes to Dune. The Fremen, which are the people living out in the desert, the people that are native to the planet. It's way more focused on that side of things because Paul Atreides is now tied in with the Fremen after his house was annihilated at the end of the last movie. And he's basically kind of learning. It feels very Empire Strikes Back in certain ways where, it's kind of him now learning a whole new way, a whole new thing, and also just kind of coming to a certain element of fulfilling kind of a role, right? He's kind of learning a whole new set of things, even though was kind of born and raised with these combat experiences and all this stuff from his his house. Like, right, he's from like this royal house and stuff. But so he has all that previous training, but now he's got to learn all kinds of new stuff that fit in with the Fremen and fit with this planet Arrakis. And it gets really heavily into, these prophecies that these characters believe he might be. And there's like this love story going on with him and Zendaya's character, Chani. or Chani. I'm not sure how it's said. Sorry, I've only seen it the once a week ago. And so he's learning it all, learning up through it all. He ends up doing like riding the worm. I really wish they would not have put that stuff in the trailers. But I will say visually, this movie was just fucking unreal. It was just out of this world. I remember telling someone in the last week since I've seen it that I feel bad for people that would see this on DVD or on on an airplane or on a streaming service at home, even if they got a good TV. This just feels like a movie you want to see on the absolute biggest possible screen. Of course, I just had the sound bite. So Hans Zimmer, of course, absolutely killed it with the score. Denis Villeneuve, I was kind of looking over it as after I was really thinking on it for a couple days, and as I was thinking about it, I'm like, okay, Denis Villeneuve has Blade Runner 2049, the first Dune movie, the movie Arrival, and now this. All four of those are like masterpiece level sci-fi. And I haven't really delved super deep into it. But my first initial thought process was, is Denis Villeneuve could he be considered the greatest sci-fi director of all time? And I know that's hard. That's kind of it's kind of a subjective thing that people can say or do or whatever. But for my book, it isn't just that like, oh my God, whatever. He did 4 great sci-fi movies. But for me, it's like the level of the movies. I would say that it kind of feels like kind of talking in the Stephen King realm. We talk about it on the other show with like Frank Darabont. Yes, there's some people that have made more Stephen King stuff than him, but the Stephen King stuff he's done, the Shawshank Redemption, the Green Mile, and the Mist, there's a weight to those because they're so fucking good. It speaks to his work, and I think Denis Villeneuve, that's where I would come at it. Not necessarily saying that no one's ever done sci-fi like this guy, but the for me, like all 4 of those movies are absolute fucking like stone cold classics, like instant classics. I think if you're going to count like kind of the post-apocalyptic Mad Max style stuff, I think you could have Mad Max Fury Road. But outside of that, that's like my list of some of the best sci-fi we've seen in the last decade or 2 decades. So it just feels like there was like a revelation of like, I already kind of knew that I loved Denis Villeneuve. I actually kind of fell in love with him through the movie Sicario. So that's like, from that point on, I'm like, if there's this dude's name's ever on anything, I'll go see it, because that was an incredible movie. So that's where I fell in love with him. But then, seeing Blade Runner 2049, and then Arrival absolutely blew me away. Like, that was actually one of my, I think it was a top 3, if not top 2 movie for the entire last decade. The 2020 or 20 teens, 2010 through 2019. I ranked my top 20 movies for that, and I don't remember exactly where. It was Arrival, Mad Max Fury Road, and Whiplash were my top 3. I don't remember the exact order I put them in, but Arrival was huge. And then both these Dune movies, I grew up, not watching it a ton, but I did see the original Dune, I'm blanking on who did it, but the original one that's kind of cheesy, whatever. I saw that one a number of times as a kid, so I wasn't completely unfamiliar with the Dune stuff, but I wasn't familiar enough with it. I haven't read the books. I tried before the first movie came out, but just couldn't get into it necessarily. I think it was just too much. It was too overwhelming. There's too much. I remember seeing something recently where somebody's like, oh yeah, in the first Dune book, there's a dictionary glossary type thing in the back, and you absolutely will need to use it. And I was like, well, that kind of makes sense. If you need to use it, then it's not going to really work for Tad reading it on or listening to it on an audiobook. So I actually thought about just buying like a hard copy. I think I bought the Kindle version, but a hard copy might be even better with flipping back and forth to a glossary at the back. So I do want to try rereading it again now. But this movie is just cinematically, like, I believe this movie is actually cinematically on the level of like Mad Max Fury Road. I mean, there are definitely different movies, but in terms of just grand scope, the scale, the stunning images, just everything about this movie was just out of this world good. I feel like there was just so many scenes that felt just like they were painted. The acting was incredible. The writing was incredible. Villeneuve, of course, directed it wonderfully. Javier Bardem's character, Stilgar, was absolutely incredible. He was very well done. He was very kind of serious for a bit, but then he was also played for laughs. Never in like a goofy, he's kind of whatever kind of way, but he was just funny the way he approached things. Like, he's convinced that Paul Atreides is this prophesied character, and so there was just all these funny moments where they wrote scenes for him to be like, I saw a meme that was saying, like, oh, Paul Atreides sneezes, and Javier Bardem's character says, and that's the way the guy that I don't remember the name again. I'm sorry, I don't have the glossary of things in front of me. But it's like, oh, that's how so and so would have sneezed, type thing. Like that was the meme, because it's like it just felt like throughout the movie there was all these like basic things where even when Timothée Chalamet's Paul Atreides is saying, no, I'm not this person, he's like, oh, look how humble he is. That's exactly the way that kind of person would be. So it was played very great. It was done it was very funny. Christopher Walken was introduced as the Emperor. We've definitely been told about the fact that this is an imperial setup. But in the last movie, Stellan Skarsgård's Baron Harkonnen was the main, villain. But we did get the impression, I don't remember if it was in the first movie or if we got it revealed in this movie, but I felt like I already kind of knew it going into this movie, that the Emperor was behind the Harkonnen wiping out of the Atreides family. And so this movie, that kind of plays out. So we got Christopher Walken, and then we got Florence Pugh playing his daughter. So that's like the Emperor and his daughter. I'm trying to think here. And then Austin Butler, I could just pause real quick to just talk about him. So he was fucking incredible. I feel like he stole every scene that he was in. There was just an electricity, a danger. There was just a lot to him. Felt like every scene with him, it just felt like it was just everyone around him was in danger. But there also was kind of an attraction to him. Like I think it's like it's ultimately charisma, right? It's like where people are just drawn to a character. I mean, you see that in real life too. People that are really charismatic, people are just drawn to them. They're attracted like flies to a flame type thing. Dust is getting to me all of a sudden. Or maybe it's the allergens. Maybe the wind is going out there. And then Rebecca Ferguson is, of course, a goddess, and her turn as Jessica, which is Paul Atreides' mom. She gets into the whole, again, I'm sorry, I wanted to go see this again so that I could actually maybe be able to pull some of these phrases a little bit better. But she's like, there's like these like nun Jedi ladies that control everything, like the Illuminati behind the scenes. She turns into one of those. And the whole time she's manipulating stuff for the benefit of her son. And Rebecca Ferguson is just awesome. So she did a great job there. Batista does a great job as kind of the commander for the Harkonnen people. Josh Brolin's character shows back up. We thought he was killed in the first movie. But yeah, it's just I know I'm talking in generalities right now. I'll hit some of the bigger story points in just a second. Man. And then, it's just, again, the visuals, of this movie, it was shot so well. Some of the sandworm scenes were incredible. Some of the action scenes, with the, what were they called? It's kind of the thing that Lucas was somewhat inspired by for the Sandcrawler. I think they were like mining, rigs. They come down to mine the spice or whatever. There's a couple action scenes that were built around those that were absolutely like edgier seat type stuff. I felt like there was the first scene where they would have like a battle around one of those things. It felt like I didn't breathe the entire time because it was just so fucking intense. It felt like I just couldn't, like, I don't know. I just felt like I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. And there was just a lot of really cool stuff when it comes to the Fremen Society. You get a lot more about them. You see behind the scenes with some of their stuff. It just felt like, I mean, of course, once I merged the two together, because that's what I was actually telling someone as well, is what I cannot wait to do is once Dune 2 comes out on disc, which I know I just said that it's always going to be better on theaters, which it will be, and that's why I want to see it a few more times in theaters. But when it does come out on disc, I think that'd be a really cool day to just watch the first two movies back to back, because it is ultimately the one story of the first book, and just watch it from one to the next with, maybe a slight break in between, but like an hour break if at most, but like otherwise watch them through so you kind of see the whole story play out, because it does a great job. You can really see a care and compassion that Villeneuve has for the material. There's a an element of, you could just see that the passion and love he has for this is evident in the movie. It doesn't ever feel cheap or small or whatever. It feels grand. It feels like every little detail was worked on by him, and his crew and cast. I'm not gonna take anything away from anyone, but it just feels like there's a care to it that was just made. The scene, one of the first scenes, if not the first scene that we see Austin Butler's character, Fend Routha, was on, I think, the Harkonnen planet, which has like a black sun or something. So the whole thing is in black and white, and there's this whole battle scene. You've seen it in the trailers where he's walking into like the arena, and then there's one point where you start to see fireworks, but they're like all in black, and it's just the coolest fucking visual. It's so cool to like draw the color away, and then somehow it actually makes it a more striking picture. It makes no sense to me in a lot of ways, but that's the way it happened. But then as it gets toward the end, like we start to get to the point where, a bunch of people are coming to Arrakis, including the Emperor, including the Harkonnen leader, and the other great houses, whatever. I don't know how many there are. Of course, I always think of like the 5 families in the Mafia. But you have like all these people coming to the planet toward the end. Basically what happens is, Paul ends up taking some of the worm juice that kind of only the nun Jedi ladies, and I know I'm mixing Star Wars stuff because, again, I'm sorry, I'm a complete neophyte. I don't know this stuff. I haven't read the book yet, so I don't have the same detailed, intricate knowledge of it. So I'm sure Dune fans are pulling their hair out, and I apologize. But he takes some of the stuff that they take, and normally it would just kill a man, and only a woman can handle it, but he actually is able to handle it. It gives him some kind of vision to stuff. He ends up finding out that the Harkonnen, the main villain that Stellan Skarsgård plays, is actually his grandpa. It is his mom's dad. And then he obviously knows that they the Harkonnen, with the backing of the Emperor, was the one that wiped his family out. They end up at one point, they find their nukes. The Atreides had nukes. They thought they were lost, but then Josh Brolin's character knows where they're at, so they use those to great usage. But then at the end is, I guess, what I really want to come down to, because I feel like it's kind of like the Last of Us, where Peter and I talked about that ages ago on the episode for The Last of Us, where it's like at the end of The Last of Us, there's this whole thing where it's like, well, wait, what does this mean morally? Is that the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? I feel like they kind of did something similar here, because then you got this whole setup where you've got the Emperor and the big Harkonnen guy, and then Paul comes in, he kills the Harkonnen guy, he calls him grandfather, kills him, and then basically claims oh, I'm sorry, wait, no, it's not Harkonnen. Yeah, no, it is. Oh fuck, actually, maybe I'm getting it wrong now. Was it the Harkonnen or was the Emperor that was his grandfather? Let's see, Atreides grandfather. Yeah, okay, it is Harkonnen. Okay. For a second, I thought I was fucking losing my mind, and it was actually, he was the Emperor's. Because then he basically claims that he's taken over the thing. He pledges himself in front of Chani, Zendaya's character, which the whole movie he's in love with, and he's like promising to be there for, and she's like, I'll always love you as long as you stay you, which when she gave that line, it made me suspicious. Because then he's there talking to the Emperor, and he says that Florence Pugh's character, the Emperor's daughter, he says that he'll take her as a wife. Which, of course, Zendaya plays wonderfully as the actor, to realize that she's kind of been betrayed and being cast aside. Earlier, before that, he tells her, no matter what, I'll always love you or whatever, but then he goes and says that, and then he basically claims, whatever, and then he basically kind of claims this larger role. The other houses fight it, but then it looks like I just blanked. The Fremen end up, it seems to me, started to like take over whatever. It kind of gives you this impression that basically Paul has just started a holy war with the Fremen. It's kind of unleashed them upon the galaxy, and I don't know. There was just an element of it though where it just felt like, okay, Paul's like this hero and stuff, but then at the end of this, it felt like there was this massive turn where it was like, wait a minute, what the fuck just happened? And it felt like there was kind of like the good side, which is Zendaya's character as well as Javier Bardem's character, and he's following a line with that most of it. But then once Josh Brolin's character comes back in, he's trying to lean on him, but he's trying to pull him to another way that's not necessarily as good. And it seems like he completely bought into Josh Brolin's side, and at the very end is more embracing kind of the old family style stuff versus the Fremen more enlightened, peaceful, whatever. And it feels like he's definitely going toward the villainous side. And I know, again, I'm a complete neophyte. I haven't read much of the books. I think I read like the first chapter or so before I realized I was in over my head. Again, because I was listening to audiobook, and I think reading it would be better. So I'm going to do that. But just the ending of it there was just very, very interesting. Also, there was the whole thing with Anna Taylor-Joy playing Paul's unborn sister. We keep seeing like this image of the fetus, but then there's a few times where you see like some sort of ghostly image of kind of what she'll be in the future. And there's like, Rebecca Ferguson's character is constantly talking to her unborn child, which is weird. I don't know. There's a lot of crazy stuff. Again, I really wish I could have seen this again. My original plan was to go see it last night. But that kind of fell through because I really wanted to have it fresher in my mind to be able to kind of go through and nerd out on this. But overall, though, I fucking love this movie, man. I really did. I cannot wait for tomorrow to go see it with Peter. It'll be his first time seeing it, but then I'll be able to kind of just really soak in more of it. And then probably over the next, I know I've got a bunch of X-Men stuff to watch, but what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to try to watch the first one on DVD or 4K or whatever. I think I've got it on 4K. Throw it on 4K, watch it, and then go see it within a day or so. Go see the second one in theaters for a third time, so that I can kind of really have a very strong vibe of the entire story playing out. Because I think that's the other thing is that kind of hurt me a tiny bit going into this Dune Part 2 was the first one was so it was so far from me, I guess. It had been at least a year since I watched the last one. I think I rewatched, or maybe it was even more. Maybe it was closer to a year and a half, because I felt like the first one came out in 2021, and then the disc came out in either late 21 or early 22. I would have watched it when I first got it on disc and not since then. So it's been a long time since I've watched it. It seems like, because again, or I guess I didn't say it, but the thing that sucks is it felt like this one snuck up on me. I think I mentioned on both shows today that it's insane to me that it's already March. Because it feels like it should be earlier than that. So I remember it was like a week or so ago that somebody mentioned that Dune was coming out next weekend. So it would have been the week before last weekend. And I was like, wait, what? Already? Like, and I just realized I was out of time. I didn't have time to watch the first movie, but to prep myself for the second one. So I will say that probably hurt my overall grasp of it. But overall, the story is incredible. As much as I watched that original one back in the day, it was not great. This one is, though. This one's so well done, so well crafted. I do believe this is a modern classic. Visually, everything about this movie is over the top good. Incredible. I don't know. I wish I could speak more to it, like as a hardcore fan of things like Star Wars, The Dark Tower, some of these other things. I wish I could really delve into it as a hardcore fan more. But I'm just not there. This is just something I'm so new at. But I will say this movie's incredible. Like I said, I'm putting it in the same category as things like Godfather 3, Terminator 2, Aliens, The Dark Knight, some of the greatest sequels of all time. The Empire Strikes Back. This fits right in with those. Absolutely incredible. I cannot wait for the third movie. Can't wait to see this one a few more times. Go see it now. Go see it on the biggest fucking screen you can. Do yourself the favor, because this is not a movie you want to see on a small screen. You want to see this on the biggest screen you can, because it is absolutely worth it. Every fucking frame of this seems painted by a brilliant artist. So great stuff. Very well done. Can't wait for the third one, which I believe is called Dune Messiah. Denis Villeneuve has said that he is going to do that one and then wrap things up. That'll be the last one. But I do know that he has also been saying he does not believe that Dune Messiah is going to be his next movie. He's going to do something else first and then come back to Dune. So it might be some time before we see Dune 3. Can't wait though. Very good stuff. Loved this movie. Austin Butler stole the show. MVP of the movie for sure. Everyone did good. Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin, Florence Pugh, Batista, Christopher Walken, Stellan Skarsgård. All these fucking people. There's just people everywhere that did great. Leah Seydoux, Anna Taylor-Joy, But Austin Butler, if I had to give an MVP award to this movie, it was him. I feel like I feel like he stole every scene that he was in. Also, I really love Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Harkonnen. That character just seems like it feels like maybe like earlier when I said like Austin Butler has that attraction that like pulls you in like a moth to the flame. Because there was a danger to him. Stellan Skarsgård feels the same way. I feel like he draws you in, but it's almost in like you're like reviled by him. And then he's super dangerous as well. But he just like it's like for him, it's almost like more like watching a car accident. Like it's horrible, but you just can't look away. So great stuff. Love this movie. Can't wait for the next one. Denis Villeneuve, bravo. So that is it. Just kind of a quick nerd out on Dune 2. So let's go ahead and jump on over to throw out the email address. If you want to contact the show, you can email the show at tad@geekeryabides.com. That's tad, TADD, at geekeryabides.com. Email the show. Let me know if you agree with something, disagree with something, you have a show idea, feedback of any kind, whatever you have. Send it my way. Be part of the show. Definitely welcome that. And then next time on the show, in 2 weeks from now, which again, keep your eyes on your social media and your YouTube channel, because I might have to move the time. Just depends on how the Dark Tower show goes. But I'll have that figured out hopefully in the next like few days, and I'll figure it out for sure. So. But next time when we do meet, whether it's exactly 2 weeks from now, a fortnight from now, or whether it's a day before, a day after, whatever it might have to be. When we come to that episode, though, I am going to be geeking out for the main topic on Star Trek: The Next Generation. I was debating on all kinds of different things to talk about. There's things like Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, just the first movie. There's all these things that were just really important to me as a kid that I was thinking about. The last episode really kind of gave me a taste for that of just geeking out about Terminator 2 and Aliens. And I was kind of like, let's maybe do something like that again. But then as I was looking around at my movie collection and stuff, and I finally landed my eyes on Star Trek: The Next Generation, I realized that's what I wanted to talk about. So next episode, talking Star Trek: Next Generation, we'll talk about the show. We'll talk about the movies. I might talk a little bit about Star Trek Picard as part of that. I don't know. But yeah, we'll talk about Star Trek Next Gen on the next episode. So that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you all for joining, and thank you for listening. Go ahead and email if you want to be part of the show or join live on the live streams over here at YouTube. We don't have enough followers or subscribers on YouTube yet to have a custom URL. So if you can go ahead and subscribe to the show, that can help us eventually get to a spot where I can say something like youtube.com/geekeryabides. I'm not there yet. I don't remember how many it is. How many subscribers you need, but I think it's like 100 or something. I don't remember, but either way, subscribe if you're a fan of the show. Even if you're not going to really engage on YouTube, if you can shoot over to YouTube, subscribe, and that will help the show out for sure. Be part of the show. Join the live streams though if you want to be part of it. That's the best way to do it because you can be here real time, like Mike was before he had to peace out because he had not seen Dune yet. But until then, I'll say sign off as I always do by saying let your geek flag fly high. To hell with anyone that wants to tell you anything about guilty pleasures. Love what you love, and to hell with anyone that wants to give you trouble for that. So go geek out, go see something fun, go read something nerdy, go play a fun video game. Love what you love and embrace it. All right, see you in a couple weeks. Bye, guys.